Hi, this is Flux. You're listening to the Diablo podcast, and we are online at diablopodcast.com. This week we are not talking about Diablo stuff. I am speaking to Chris Wilson, the lead something of Path of Exile.
That's right, yeah. I'm the lead designer of Path of Exile.
If you can briefly describe what does that entail?
The role of lead designer basically means I'm in charge of the numeric balance of the game, and also in collating everyone's opinions on game design and making sure that we get a consistent vision of how to do that.
And that probably requires a lot of communication and also programming and also playtesting.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of different things needed for that job, but most of the time it's communication, sure, and a lot of Excel.
For someone who doesn't know anything about Path of Exile, can you give the brief blurb what it is?
Path of Exile is a online action RPG. It can only be played on our persistent secure servers. So it's a lot like Diablo 2's Battle.net, for example. And we've set it in a dark fantasy world that's quite gritty with visceral action combat. We've been trying hard to get across a feeling of weight and position in the combat, so you can get stun-locked easily, you can get boxed in by monsters, and basically we're encouraging tactical play rather than... we feel that a lot of recent online games feel kind of floaty and you're not really in the combat, taking care of where you're standing, so we're trying to push that angle in our game.
That sounds a little bit like a Diablo 1, kind of.
Well, it was a great game.
One of the things people noticed, just since you mentioned Diablo 2, is that you could kind of run away from anything in Diablo 2. You know, you could run through 20 monsters almost if you had to get in trouble. And you're saying tactical gameplay is obviously a very different sort of element.
Yeah, we're trying to push that. For example, a couple of days ago we made a change that makes it much easier for monsters to hit you when you're running past them. Previously they'd miss because you're not quite at the point of their sword when they swing down. Now it's a lot easier for them to hit you. Of course it means that it's easier for you to hit them, which feels a lot better too.
So you created, with a couple of friends I guess, Grinding Gear Games just what, a few years ago?
Yeah, it was late 2006, but back then it was literally me and a few friends, working out of my bedroom and then my garage. And
so you've grown. You said you have 15 employees now. So
that's right.
When you started out, you thought we love action RPGs. I thought you told me when we spoke last year you were a big fan of Diablo 2. All you guys were.
That's right. Yeah.
And you just said this is cool. We could make a game kind of like this, and we think people would like it.
Yeah, we'd played a lot of action RPGs over the years. We enjoyed Dungeon Siege and Titan Quest a lot as well. And as I'm sure you remember, in late 2006, there hadn't been a good action RPG, especially not an online one, released for a long time. I mean, back then, Diablo 3 had not been announced, and who knows what was happening there. So we saw a gap in the market and figured we could do the genre justice.
And did you think it would take this long? Is this, are you kind of on your schedule?
It took longer than we expected, but it also turned out a lot better than we expected, so I'm very happy with that.
It took you a while to really get churning along, I would guess.
That's right. It's mostly prototyping and planning ideas, testing out various systems back then. It was pretty much late 2008 that we got into full swing with a lot of employees and fast development.
It's not exactly an MMORPG. You said it is a free-to-play. You have to play it online. You have instances, basically?
Yeah, everything is instanced, and this has a lot of gameplay and technical benefits for us. From an example of a technical benefit, it means that we can easily distribute it across a lot of servers, so it's very easy to maintain and to code, and it's also quite cheap to run. It means we don't need crazy code to handle 2,000 people being in the same area at once. And from a gameplay point of view, it's nice that you can design the instances around a low number of people. Our current maximum party size is 6 people, so you can make quite a compelling experience that 6 people can play through that doesn't rely on monsters respawning over time and various other things that are common in MMORPGs. And of course, the final benefit is you get to have randomly generated areas, which I'm sure Diablo fans love, so we're pushing that as hard as we can.
Are the towns like larger hubs for more people, or how do you get into your instance of up to 6?
The towns do hold, I think, a capacity of 32 people at the moment, and that's where you meet players to make parties so you can venture out into the smaller instances.
So you've been alpha testing, which has been sort of a friends and family kind of thing.
Yeah, and a few people from the forums.
Yeah, can you say how many people, or is that confidential? I mean, like under 500, 100?
We have something like 180 accounts, but many of those are people that asked to play, as a friend or family member, played for a few hours, said, great game, but I'm not really into RPGs, or basically just wanted to play to show interest, but haven't actually stuck around. In terms of actual dedicated testers, I think we have maybe 100 people who play frequently out of the 180 that we invited, and those people are really good at giving feedback. We've been getting feedback that's encouraged major game changes since then.
What are you expecting to scale up to when you get into the beta test?
Well, our first goal is, because we're giving out beta access at PAX, we have to make sure that the beta is scaled up to that point before we go to PAX so that we know we aren't going to kill our servers.
Mm-hmm.
So we're expecting there to be several thousand people invited within the next few weeks, and our current rate that we were thinking of is maybe 100 people per day, though that will have to change depending on how the servers are doing. So if the servers are unhappy with 100 people a day, we drop it down for a little while until we have those problems solved. In the long term, I would expect maybe 10,000 people would get invited to the beta by the end of the year.
So you're pushing for a 2011 release?
I mean, it's just roughly picking dates out of thin air at the moment, but we could enter open beta early next year. And it would be great if the closed beta had scaled up to a decent size by then so that we know that the massive influx of new users isn't going to kill everything.
So how do you know when you're ready to go from beta to release?
Well, put it this way. We're not going to sell any microtransactions during the closed beta phase. So we'll only sell people stuff once we're happy that the quality of the game is worth buying things for it. So people get to play for free with no strings attached until that point. It's pretty much a matter of, are all the major bullet points hit? For example, at the moment, PvP is not currently enabled in the alpha, and we're going to try to get PvP in very soon for the beta because it's such an important part of games like this. But we definitely wouldn't enter open beta without a feature like that.
And that's a good segue. I was going to ask you about how you're paying for this thing. You've said you're doing an ethical item shop, I believe was your wording.
That's right. Ethical microtransactions.
And yes, not really an item shop. You're not really selling items. You're selling like capes and stuff and like armor die kind of things, or
basically stuff that makes you more awesome without affecting the gameplay. And one of the examples that people seem to like is the concept of buying alternate animation skins or spell effects. For example, there's a boss in the game who uses a version of a player skill that looks completely different. You know, instead of ground slam, it's blood slam, and it has blood everywhere. So, for example, for $5, someone could make it so their ground slam looks like that. This, of course, means that suddenly all their teammates, care a lot about where they got that from and how awesome it is. And
so everybody else sees it as well, obviously.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's why you get this stuff. You get the crystal armor so that you look awesome rather than because there's any benefit to it, which there isn't. Yeah, it's a proven business model. I mean, games like League of Legends, for example, have made a lot of money from the sale of non-functional stuff. I mean, it serves as donations and it lets people look different. And to be honest, the reason why people play this type of game is because they want to look different than other people and to stand out in a large community.
You started off with your initial team back in 2006, and you obviously had some kind of design plans and basic, you all brainstormed what would be cool features to put in an RPG?
Right. Yeah, it was partly built around looking at other games that were similar to this and looking at what went wrong in those. For example, I mean, when we play a game like Titan Quest or Diablo, we feel the item system in those games is great. It's so much fun to kill monsters and find new items. But there were various things like, for example, the potions that we felt were an afterthought in those games and were quite poorly handled. Mm-hmm. So we came up with new systems for those. It's very interesting to note that some of the systems that we radically redesigned, like skills and potions, were both redesigned by Blizzard as well for Diablo 3.
Mm-hmm.
So they've acknowledged the fact that those systems were potentially flawed initially.
There's 6 slots for potions on your belt, and each one there's like 5 potions in each slot, and it kind of rejuvenates itself. I'm sure you can describe that better than I just did.
So we basically wanted to reduce the concept of potion spam, where people will go to town and buy 30 potions for their inventory. And the way we did this is by making it so that we now call them flasks, and that's an item that's part of your build. And as you mentioned, it does regenerate as you play and kill monsters. So they have a number of charges that they use, and as you fight monsters, the charges regenerate, which means that because it's part of your build, you now care a lot what your loadout of flasks is. For example, you might want some flasks that have a large capacity and heal you slowly, or some of them that are for emergency use and heal you quickly. But we also put properties on them, like the ability to dispel status ailments when you drink them, or to run quickly while you're healing. So now you have utility flasks that help you get out of combat if there's a problem.
Yeah, I noticed playing in the early levels, you eventually you just have like the red flasks and the blue flasks, and then eventually you find one that's got magical bonuses, and it's like, wow, cool. I can heal, I can drink mana or health, and I get bonuses at the same time. I enjoyed that actually.
Yeah, we're trying to push it as part of the player's build, especially for PvP. The neat thing about having them regenerate as you kill, of course, in PvP they don't regenerate because you're not killing except when you kill an opponent. So this means that you get your initial charges in your flask, and that's it for the whole PvP encounter, which is fair because PvP in other games. People could cheat by drinking potions if that was against the rules, or they had potions that are on long cooldowns. Whereas here, it's part of your build. You may choose to take no health flasks into PvP to have a lot of mana, so you can blitz really high mana cost spells if you choose.
Some things are probably just what you planned them on being, years ago, and other things have either not worked, or you've gotten better ideas or different ideas.
Well, one of the things we're looking into at the moment is the requirements of various items in the game. We've got feedback suggesting that the requirements are a little too strict and forces people to play with stuff that's very class specific, whereas we want a very open system, so we're reworking things slightly so that it's a little easier to splash other classes' abilities.
We should describe a little bit how the attributes are formed, which is a really interesting system with the gems and the passive skills.
The short version of it is that there are 3 attributes in the game: strength, dexterity, and intelligence. Each of the character classes is aligned with 1 or 2 of those attributes. For example, the Marauder is a pure strength character, and he excels at anything related to strength. He's still able to use dexterity and intelligence, but he doesn't get quite the bonus that he would do if he was one of the classes that use those attributes. This is a little bit like the card game Magic the Gathering, where you have access to all 5 colors of cards, but it's better for you to use just the color or 2 colors that you've chosen. However, there are often good reasons to use a 3rd or 4th color, but you have to pay the cost associated with that. So you get some pretty interesting emergent behavior where players come up with crazy builds. A strength character using dexterity and intelligence stuff because it combos really well with their strength build.
The most visually impressive thing I noticed about the interface is this huge passive skills thing, which looks like a giant spiderweb, sort of. It looks like you're zoomed in on a Google Maps of a city or something when you first look at it, and you think, oh, that's interesting. You see, I don't know what, maybe 10 or 15 skills with little spiderwebs kind of connecting them. And then you scroll over, and then you scroll over, and then you scroll over, and it's like zooming out on a Google map. So you keep going, how big is this thing?
Yeah, well, we have 750 passive skills there at the moment.
Well, that's how big it is.
They only take a single point each. The basic idea is your character's build, as far as the passives go, is your exploration of, as you call it, the spiderweb of these skills. So you might have a path that takes you through things that increase your fire damage, or things that increase your damage with mauls, for example. And our goal there is that we encourage people to pick up passives that they wouldn't normally choose because they're, as we say, low-hanging fruit. They're tempting and very large nearby. And we're trying to get people to stray from the pure path that they've chosen so that although there are benefits for merely maxing out, for example, fire damage, there are also lots of interesting builds where you only get a moderate amount of fire damage and perhaps you specialize in minions or something like that at the same time.
Can you have fire minions?
Well, this is getting onto the active skill system a little, but if you support your minion skill gem with an added fire damage, then yes, your minions will deal fire damage.
So each time you enable a skill, then the other skills, the other passive skills here that are connected to it by little lines in this giant matrixy spiderwebby thing light up. So you can kind of follow a path through it, almost like following a maze. And you can, it's divided into 3. It's like a big pie wedge of 3 different colors: the red and the blue and the green. And you can, like you say, you can stay all in the red, and it's mostly strength. And each little dot's got different skill options. It just seems a very interesting way. It's like you'll see a cool skill, 3 or 4 nodes away, and you'll be like, okay, my next 3 points can go into bridging these little, like hopping across a pond on lily pads or something, to get to that cool skill, which is then enabled by the gem in your items, which is a whole other system.
That's right. We're very proud of that design.
Yeah. Wasn't really a question there, was it?
It's a great description.
Please save me with your segue.
Yeah. we need to get you to write the text for our website. That was really good.
I can even write the dialogue for my podcast. Please,
nice.
Go ahead.
I think the best segue would probably be into the active skill system to complete the skills discussion.
Skills come on gems, which you put into items. Skills are not part of your character, as far as I've noticed. I mean, you don't have inherent skills in each character.
That's right. The gems are aligned with attributes, so there are clearly some that are better for your build or for your class, but you can, with some effort, use any skill from any class. This means that you might, for example, have a pure melee guy who benefits from the aforementioned minions, so that it can affect the way he plays in combat, maybe getting the minions to tank a lot of the damage.
And I keep thinking of little tidbits to add, but I mean, so at the start, if you're the Marauder, and if you put a point in your first red skill, which is like plus life or something along those lines,
sure,
or plus damage or something, that would gives you what, like plus 12 strength and like plus 6 to the other 2 attributes, something like that.
Yeah, it gives you some bonuses to each of the attributes.
But if you put that point into the blue skill, then you only get like 6 strength and other stuff. You don't get as much you don't get as much of the attributes from skills out of your strong color, I guess you'd say.
That's right. It is best to focus on the color that you're aligned with, but you do have some good reasons occasionally to choose other colors. An example would be if you want to attack faster, it's quite hard to get increased attack speed in the strength tree. I mean, there are some nodes hidden away that you have to work for, but there's a giant clump of very tempting increased attack speed right at the beginning of the dexterity tree. So at any stage, someone can just grab some points in that if they want to. But in doing so, they slightly dilute their character class. That we're designing it around allowing people a certain amount of freedom. You know, you can splash some percentage of your skills in off-class things without too much penalty.
I think my last character I played, I'm a marauder somewhat, and right at the start there's an increased accuracy in the dexterity tree portion, pie wedge, whatever, and I was like, I have to have that, you know. But then you're looking at what I'm giving up in the red, and it's like, oh, it's only hit points. I can go without 15 more hit points for right now.
Fair enough.
But then, of course, it all multiplies over time because that also adds to your attributes. So I'm giving up a little bit of strength by hitting this dexterity skill.
That's correct. If you put too many points in dexterity, then later on you'll find you have to wait 1 or 2 levels longer to start using the best items for your class. We do believe that it's better for you to choose off-class things occasionally where it's necessary.
You've obviously been redoing this big passives matrix quite a bit based on what character input and what people have discovered as maybe make high-level characters.
Yeah, it's very interesting to download all the characters from the alpha realm and go through what passives they've chosen. The alpha testers are very much the min-maxing type who say, I'm going to do fire damage, and then they put all their points in fire damage, ignoring the obvious, very good other skills that they could pick up along the way. It's quite interesting to examine it. So we use that feedback to try to make the not-picked skills a lot stronger, and now they're too good to give up.
And to some extent, people are probably trying to break the system a little bit. I mean, that's kind of what alpha testers are supposed to do. You know, you just see, if I do everything into this one thing, what'll happen?
Indeed, we see some pretty interesting builds. I mean, recently we were quite happy with how attack speed works, and then I saw a certain ranger in the game that caused me to reevaluate completely how much attack speed you can get on items.
So he'd gotten so much that it was breaking the system, or?
Yeah, he got so much that it literally prevented him doing damage to monsters because of a bug that it manifested with arrows moving too quickly. So we fixed that, and now we've made a much more reasonable attack speed limit.
And you're expecting much more of this, I guess, when you get into the beta and you've got 10 times the testers.
Yeah, that's going to be really good in terms of feedback.
You sound like you're eager for that.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a lot of emails to read, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is what you do. I mean, you enjoy getting the feedback and making tweaks, and of course, I mean, this is what you want to do. It's probably, I'd imagine you're kind of a statty guy, kind of a numbery type guy.
It's very interesting to plan this kind of stuff. It's interesting to see what effect it has on how people perceive that particular patch. You know, patches that make everything more powerful are definitely seen as good ones, whereas patches that fix an inherent gameplay problem by making things worse are generally interpreted negatively.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Have you had any big blow-ups yet?
No, nothing major, no. It's people are very reasonable about it in the alpha. We've picked quite an intelligent group of guys, so we're getting some good feedback.
You know, the last week there's been a lot of feedback, and Diablo 3 announced a bunch of features that have been fairly unpopular with the real money trading and always online stuff. And not getting into so much what you think about those, but I mean, do you feel more of kind of a sympathy for other developers now? And now that you are a developer and you get angry emails yourself?
Indeed. I mean, in those examples that you gave, I can definitely see the reasons why those decisions were made, and in many ways I'd agree with many of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I choose to make the same choices for this game.
Yeah.
So I definitely sympathize with the backlash, but then I understand what the players mean. I mean, they maybe wanted the game to be something different, like a single-player one, for example, that was available offline. And I can totally understand why people would make it online only. I mean, we've made our game online only for exactly the same reason. It completely curbs piracy immediately. You multiply your revenue by 5 because of it. It's really the only way to make a PC game nowadays. But yet I could imagine the fans being upset because this is just mentioned after several years.
Yeah, and of course you're not selling your game for $60, so people are paying it for free. They don't have any complaints about playing it online for free.
Hopefully, though I'm sure they'll find something to complain about.
Well, of course. You need to make more patches every day, more content.
Yeah.
High-end stuff. So you guys, I would imagine, have lots of plans. You know, I mean, are you just scratching the surface of what you want to do in Path of Exile now? I mean, you have most of what you want in?
Unfortunately, there is so much more that we can and will add. You know, we have just looking at short-term features that we want to add to make it awesome. There's a year of stuff there, so there's definitely going to be big-ticket items arriving. You know, after we enter closed beta, after we enter open beta, and after it's formally released, we'll still be unveiling large new systems.
Were there other things that you don't think are ever going to work in the game? I mean, like you had plans going in, and it's too big, or it won't work with this style of game, and you're like, oh, we'll have to save that idea for Path of Exile 2 or for some other game in the future?
We'd rather maintain this one for a decade rather than make a direct sequel to it, but In answer to your question, I can't think of any major plans that we've completely scrapped off the top of my head, partly because once something is getting a bit of friction, we might put it on the back burner, choose to include it again once we know a good way of doing it.
What's the lifespan of a character in this game? Do you think people will play the same character forever? I mean, will they respec eventually and start over? Will they make new builds?
That's a very good question, and it's something that's very important to us because we want it so that a player who plays just one guy has a lot of stuff to do, but we also want to encourage people to try a variety of characters. I mean, to some extent in action RPGs, it's relatively quick to make a character. I mean, if I load up a copy of Diablo 2 now, I can get to high level within a few days of playtime, whereas if I choose, say, World of Warcraft, it's going to take me weeks or months to hit the endgame content. Mm-hmm. So we understand that people can play through the life of their character, within a few days of really dedicated playtime, and therefore we want to make sure there are lots of other interesting builds and other characters they can play, or if they choose to play their existing guy, there's a lot of items they can find and interesting PvP and PvE endgame content for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you worked on endgame content? Is there something to do besides, is it better than Diablo 2? You just do boss runs over and over again at that point?
We decided early on that we really don't like the idea of just doing boss runs over and over at the end. Actually, this is a system that we can talk about that we've scrapped. Our initial plan that we discussed with you a year ago was this concept of having a flat 4th difficulty level. Basically, you play through the 3 difficulty levels, and then the 4th one, everything is the same level. And the design behind this was that it means there's no reason to just do a single boss run, because now you have the entire game at your disposal, and you could potentially specialize your character for some type of area, and then play there. So we tried this out, and people were indeed grinding in the final 4th difficulty level, but the problem was they basically all played in the 1 or 2 areas that had the best monster distribution or AI problems. Mm-hmm. Like they'd find an area that had a small amount of ranged damage, for example, and they'd play there with a build that kills guys from a range. This behavior wasn't really what we wanted, because now everyone is playing just one area again, which is exactly what we wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
So we've changed the way the end game works, and although this is very much on the drawing board at the moment, I mean, we've barely got any feedback from high-level players about this area. I think only 3 guys have ever played in it before online. But the way we currently have it work is when you finish the normal difficulty levels, there's a very hard unlockable area that basically gives you a random level that you play through. Like, it could be anywhere in the game with, interesting, crazy things going on. Random chests and monsters that aren't supposed to be in that area, kind of like guest monsters from 1.10 and Diablo 2. Mm-hmm. But you can progress through these areas, and they're different each time. You don't know what to expect. You could leave the prison and enter a beach, for example, or be in a forest. And this means that the player can't particularly spec their character around killing a certain type of guy. Like, you don't make your skeleton build and then farm the end game in that way. So we're still working on feedback for the system, but so far it solves the goal of having everyone play in the same area over and over again. And now people are having to build much more general, competent endgame characters.
Because of the way the skills work in your game, characters tend to... There's so many details about the gems and stuff we didn't even touch on. It's much more complicated than one would expect from a free-to-play game anyway, at least more than I thought it would be. But gems level up. Gems grant you your active skills, and they level up as you use them. You get attached to them, and you want to keep using them. You can put gems into new items. We're calling Diablo 3 system free specs because it's free to respec like anytime you want to. And a lot of people are kind of unhappy about that because they like to have a build that's a little more stable, and you kind of, you develop a character and they have strengths and weaknesses, and then you kind of learn to deal with that. And that sounds like what you guys are doing with your system to some degree.
Well, we allow people to move their gems around. Like, for example, if you choose to play a fire character, you can switch between fire skills at will until you find the one that works best for your build. But because our passive skills are locked in and we don't have an easy global respec for passives, you're definitely locked into the build that you've chosen to go with. If you choose to play a maul guy, for example, who's going to hit guys with 2-handed clubs, that's pretty much the way that you have to play. And if you want to play a different character, although you can fix a few mistakes along the way with very small scale respecs, if you want to switch to a bow character, for example, it's probably a better use of your time to just change to play a new character and enjoy that one instead.
Do you have limits on how many characters a person can play?
At the moment, the limit is 24 characters per account, but you can just make another free account if you want to.
Yeah, so no.
So, yeah, I mean, the 24 is just arbitrary, so people don't make 1,000 characters. But, I mean, it's the kind of thing we could monetize later if we choose to sell character slots. But to be honest, people will probably prefer to pick a new account over that, unless they really want everything consolidated in one account. And as usual, our policy there is we pick a limit that's way above what we would otherwise pick if we were trying to make money from that. 24 is more than most people would use. So yeah. People can't complain that we've screwed them down to 3 character slots and then charge for the rest, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and they can just delete characters, I'd imagine, and make new ones. You're not gonna. Yeah, it's tough to have 24 active characters in a game. I mean, that's a.
Yeah, though this is across several different leagues, so you've got your hardcore characters and your normal characters, and then if we open some kind of 1 month competition to the first person to reach level 90, then you have some characters in that as well. If you're playing a league over the weekend where they reward the highest level character with a unique item at the end, for example, then you have some characters in that. So there's a lot of different game modes that you'd have your 24 characters spread across.
So you mentioned hardcore. There is a hardcore mode.
Yeah, the hardcore mode is a little different than the way it's handled in the Diablo games. Basically, we've made it so that when you die in hardcore, you change back into a non-hardcore character. This is very interesting because it encourages people to try hardcore, because if they die, they don't really lose anything. They get all the items that they found in their normal league that they play in quite happily. Mm-hmm. And from the hardcore player's point of view, the character is gone from the hardcore league. So, it's effectively dead to them. And we find that many true hardcore players will still treat it as permadeath. I mean, they can't interact with that character meaningfully anymore because it's back with the noob players, as they say.
Yeah.
But from a experimentative normal player's point of view, it gives you less barrier to entry to try playing hardcore. You can play it until your death occurs, and then you've got your wealth that you accumulated back in the league that you normally play.
And is there going to be a $5 restore hardcore character to hardcore in the item shop?
I'm pretty sure we can guarantee that will never happen.
Okay, good. The economy obviously varies as well. I mean, once you die, all the items that that character had in the hardcore are now in softcore, or whatever you call the normal.
That's right.
You're not calling it softcore, are you?
We're using the term default or non-hardcore.
Yeah.
People informally call it softcore. It's funny that softcore sounds more like porn, whereas hardcore doesn't.
Yeah, it's a little pejorative too. It's like, oh, you're soft, Care Bear League or something. Yeah. Are there any other differences between hardcore? I mean, it's just identical, and if you die, you're no longer hardcore.
That's right. At this stage, it's exactly the same. The items are the same, and we haven't announced any plans to have them different, though it's something we're definitely considering, a few interesting hardcore-only items.
Speaking of items a little bit, can you give a sort of a brief rundown? I mean, do you have like something equivalent to item sets or unique items or rare items? How the randomization handle on that?
The randomization is very similar to what you'd expect from this type of genre, but we've pushed it as hard as we can. I mean, as I mentioned before, we've put mods on the flasks in the game. We have the skills are itemized, for example. We've tried very hard to make it so that items are basically the main emphasis of the game. And as you'd expect, you can get normal, magic, rare, and unique items. We don't currently have item sets. We kind of feel that if a person was covering their character in unique items, then they're playing it wrong, because with unique items, we're trying to make them utilitarian and not better than the best rares. Mm-hmm. So perhaps they're 80th or 90th percentile, they're quite good, but unless you have a specific reason to use one for your build, like it grants a property you need that isn't available on that type of item, then you'd generally be better off long-term using the best rare items that you can find.
And really the biggest thing about items, in my experience, is if they have sockets or not.
Yeah, that's an important thing to consider, because in addition to the mods that you have on them, you want to have a good socket layout that enables you to use the skills you want. It is possible to re-roll the mods and the sockets separately, so people often get an item with good mods and then work to get a perfect set of sockets on it.
And perfect sockets, you want multiple sockets that are linked. Sockets can be linked or separate. And then there's the 3 colors of sockets as well, which correspond to the 3 attributes.
Right, and some characters want to have the rare off-color sockets. If you're playing Marauder, which uses Strength, which is a red attribute, and you find something with blue sockets, that can either be very frustrating or very useful, depending on whether or not you actually need those. So you see some interesting trades where some people completely don't value an item that has multiple linked off-color sockets, whereas other people will trade their entire net worth to get it, because that enables a strange build that they're making.
And that they would have some, your Marauder example, he would have a blue dexterity gem that had a useful skill on it, and so he would want that socket in his item so he could use that skill.
Yeah, he'd need to find the off-color socket on one of his items, so he'd have to plan very carefully which one is the most disposable. It's interesting, sometimes when we're looking at how people build characters, we see that, for example, half of their items have good mods, and the other half have really weak mods but a really good socket arrangement, whereas the best characters manage to achieve both on the same item.
Yeah, of course, the min-maxers.
Yeah, and the lucky guys who find those good items.
So the big deal this week in Diablo 3 is the announcement of the auction house. Have you got a trading system in Path of Exile?
We haven't announced any plans for a formal large-scale trading system yet, but we definitely have something in the works. It's not at all the same as what you just discussed, though.
Are they just dropping items on the ground, or you have some sort of interface?
Technically, right this second, they're dropping items on the ground because they all trust each other. Having said that, we fully expect to get a trade screen in before beta, or at least in the very first week of beta, so people will be able to trade with strangers securely once the beta starts. But there's another facet to this, which we can talk about, and that's the concept of forum item linking. Basically, when you go to the Path of Exile website and log in as an account that has access, you're able to see all of your items on the website and link them in forum posts. For example, you can say, hey guys, look at this awesome mace that I just found. What do you think about it? And when they hover the mouse cursor over it, it says the mods, just like it is in-game. It's got the same hover and the same graphic. Mm-hmm. It shows all the sockets, shows all gems that are inside it. And this means that you can use it in trading forums to show off the items that you want to trade really easily. And it also says whether or not you have the item still and whether or not it's been modified since then. So if someone lists an item and then they trade it away, there's no need for them to update the post to say, oh yeah, I traded that mace last week, because now it's marked as such when you look at it. This is how people are trading at the moment as a way of finding what items, though we do have a better system in the works. I mean, our long-term goals there are an even higher degree of separation. We understand that people can't play Path of Exile while they're at school or at work, but hopefully they can sit on the website all the time managing their characters and trading items.
Yeah, the game becomes bigger than the actual game for some people.
Yeah.
So you've had about a year since you announced this title.
That's right.
I believe your first press run was when I met you guys in San Francisco, which was in like September or so?
That's correct, yeah. We flew over to talk to journalists, including you, and then we went to PAX to find more journalists to show off.
You must have had some interesting experiences in the past year as you've become a developer. Now you're kind of courting journalists and courting media and meeting fans.
Well, it's very interesting and very frustrating at times. People are happy to talk about you when you have an announcement, but unless you have something very exclusive for them to write about, most journalists aren't particularly interested in writing.
Yeah. Well, okay. Nice talking to you. Bye, Chris. No, wait, what?
Nice.
Yeah. So
well, you've been very good, Flux.
Yeah. You went to Penny Arcade. You got to hang out with Max Schaefer and some of the other guys from Runic Games, right?
That was really awesome.
And that was cool because you were all Diablo fans, Diablo 2 fans.
Yeah, I think I was a little too fanboyish then.
Yeah. It's tough when you're first meeting people and you're just getting into this stuff. I've noticed, when I've been to BlizzCons and the press room and stuff, and it's kind of old hat to me because I was at Blizzard North a few times. God, 10 years ago I was at Blizzard North the first time, and I'm sure I was wide-eyed and drooling at the moment. But when I see new people now, they're just they're like they're meeting some Blizzard person, like, oh my god. But you have to be cool now because you're a developer. So
yeah,
someday there'll be kids like, oh my god, I met Chris Wilson and he was so cool.
Yeah, we have one of those guys in our forum.
You have one fanboy.
Well, we have one fanboy who says, I met Chris, it was awesome. I'm sure he'll be hearing this as well.
You'll get more once the beta starts. You have legions of people stalking you.
Yeah. I have to take the address down.
Yeah, you're too accessible now. Yeah. You need a layer of a PR fuel between you and any real fans.
Nice.
You're coming along pretty well. You said you're looking at closed beta pretty much the rest of the year, you're thinking, or until it's good.
Yeah, I mean, we anticipate that that's about the time frame that it will become good in, yes.
I mean, it's good now, but until you start charging money for add-ons.
That's right. The thing that we have to stress to our fans, though, is that it's a work in progress that requires their feedback and collaboration to help make it awesome. I mean, a lot of people are very eager to play it in the next few days, expecting the game to be completely finished. I mean, something like a Blizzard beta basically is completely finished, whereas our game, I mean, there's 1,000 changes we plan to make in the next few months, let alone ones that we've made so far. So there's a lot that's going to change, and we'd rather that people were very, they suggested improvements rather than just criticize the system, because pretty much every system has a list of improvements that we're considering, and nothing should be taken as finished. It's more of a testing beta rather than a marketing beta.
Just since I've been in the alpha, even with the limited amount of playtime I've had, I mean, like I played it the first night and took a bunch of notes for a couple of hours and sent you an email like the next day, and like half the things I said, like, oh, good point, we'll put that in the next patch, and I was like, wait, what? That was too easy.
That was good feedback.
I was expecting we tried this and it didn't really work, or that's a good idea, I mean, we'll think about it. But like half the stuff, you're like, oh, I like that, we'll do that. And I'm like, really? Yeah. Okay.
Well, with that kind of thing, I mean, put it this way, we probably know that is a problem, and it's just a matter of prioritizing what things a new player finds to be a problem. So we ask people after they play through it for now, what are the first 4 things that you would fix about this game? And it's amazing that some of the things that we deem to be high priority aren't necessarily on the list, whereas they list some of the easiest to fix stuff possible. If the density of monsters, for example, is a problem that makes the game less fun, then we can fix that in 20 minutes. And so we did.
Yeah, that was one of the points I made, which is probably why you brought that up. But it seemed like they were a little bit too evenly distributed. Like every time I moved a half a screen in one direction, I would know that I was going to get 3 monsters coming from all different directions. Like it just seemed like I wanted more clumping and more spacing. And you're like, okay, that's a good idea. We'll do that.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where when we implemented the monster spacing at the beginning, we did something nice and simple, made some plans that one day we'll improve it, and then went on to the next feature we needed, like death or something like that, or the skill system. So having never got around to actually fixing up the monster placement, it was very easy to put some attention to it once we had it listed as a problem that actually someone would notice while playing.
And you just tweaked some algorithms or something where their distribution, it was an easy change.
That's right, yes.
And it's funny because you mentioned, you replied to my email and you said, no one else, most of our other testers have been doing this for so long, they don't really notice these little things.
Yeah.
And then the next character I played, I didn't notice that because I kind of knew where I was going and what I was doing more. Like I was moving along more quickly along the beach and getting like 5 or 6 monsters at once in a pack instead of taking very slow incremental advances. And I didn't notice the spacing issues at all like I had the first time. Like, no wonder nobody noticed this.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the evolution that a tester takes, where at the beginning their feedback is very useful because it hits the stuff that people will find wrong with the game in the first 5 minutes, the first impression thing. And eventually the tester learns so much about the game that they can give you very deep feedback on complicated systems that a new player wouldn't understand. And although that tester doesn't necessarily notice if the beginning of the game is now too hard or too easy, they can definitely comment on, for example, the long-term viability of a duelist using bows.
There's a shared stash system in the game, I believe, yes?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, so that would obviously affect your, new experienced players starting off an alt because they can now twink a couple of items. Yeah. So,
and that's intentional. I mean, we look at it as a meta item grind. You're not just finding items for the character you're playing, but you want to find items for future characters.
Yeah, I would say that's a good system. I wouldn't dispute that in any way, but it's just it changes how you play at the start when you have a good weapon or a good armor or something already, obviously.
Well, I mean, it makes it fun to put on the item that lets you kill some monsters faster for a while.
Yeah, it's a weird, the players, I guess you have to kind of deal with that as a developer because, you don't want people to blast through the game in 5 seconds, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun to be turboed or to be rushed or to use your twinked item. To some extent, exploiting, you have to decide, is this an exploit or is this a strategy?
Right, and at the end of the day, we never want to take something away if it's really enjoyable, providing that it doesn't cause hurt to other players.
Are people into it enough yet that they're viciously advocating one class over another, or?
Well, your commentary there is very accurately representing the current state of the game. So, yeah, that's quite astute. We haven't had people emphatically saying one class is better than the others without a real reason behind it. I mean, for example, currently, we've just been through a phase where the archers were too strong, and we saw this because the ladder was full of archers.
Yeah.
So we made some changes to attack speed and fixed a few ranger skills, and now the archers aren't quite as good as they used to be.
And now the marauders are pissed because they're too good or something. It's just it goes. Wait till you have 500 people in every camp. That'll be fun.
Nice. Well, the marauders are going to get some boosts in the patch that we may apply today or tomorrow.
And you haven't announced the PvP system yet, wasn't there? Didn't you say something interesting about PvP recently in one of your press releases?
Yeah. We issued a press release basically explaining that we're committed to providing a very competitive PvP environment, one that using matchmaking means that competitive players will get matched against other competitive players and accumulate rankings in a variety of different PvP modes. So you have your organized team play, 1v1 dueling, some scenario-based things that are linked in with the story, PvP within specific plot scenarios, helping out NPCs, for example, and also organized tournaments that can run on schedules where you might join a 128-person tournament and there's elimination rounds until the final victor gets some kind of prize. We're trying to push the competitive aspect of this as hard as we can here, and it comes across in a lot of other decisions. For example, with a lack of easy respecs in the game, it means that a player's build actually matters, and it's harder to build cookie-cutter characters. I mean, if you read online that the best build is, a certain type of witch, for example, at the moment, it's quite a commitment to actually go and build that witch, which means that players that are good at playing the game and have a good economic backing and a lot of items in their stash have an advantage in PvP because they can actually play the character that's good at the moment.
Where does PvP take place?
There are a variety of locations. Basically, we have some randomly generated arenas, which aren't visible in the game yet, but should be in relatively soon. And because these are randomly generated, we're pushing things like, for example, random shrines or blockages and other things that might be interesting. Places where players can lay traps in order to surprise the opponents. That type of thing with a random area is much more dynamic. There isn't the same choke point every time. Instead, the players have to quickly assess the situation and choose in their team which way they want to go, for example.
So PvP is enabled at game creation, or is it there's no PK switch like Diablo 2 or Diablo 1?
At the moment, there's no PK switch except in a certain type of league, where a league is a game mode, where you create a character. There is a certain type of league we plan to add shortly, which is called the Cutthroat League. And basically the plan here is that all of the instances are public, and there's free player killing. And when you die, you drop your items. So as you can imagine, people are going to be very careful about what stuff they leave town with, wearing just their backup gear, trying hard to accumulate wealth, and frequently losing all of their stuff.
I think that was what I was thinking of. I remember reading a press release about something where all your items were at stake in PvP.
Yeah.
It sounded interesting.
Well, with that mode, we're only targeting it at the 5% of the gamers who actually care about that. I mean, other people literally don't even need to think about it. It's an option they can choose to not play in, and they're not hurt, and they never lose their items like that. But for the players that love it, I mean, they'll hopefully really like that game mode. We'll make it very clear what that mode entails so that people don't accidentally choose it. But to be honest, I mean, I didn't think I'd like that myself until I tried the game Darkfall Online, which is a very, very hardcore, massively multiplayer game that has the same type of system, where when you die, you lose all your stuff and people can easily PK you. And it was honestly so much fun. I mean, I preferred that over all the World of Warcraft I've played in the past. It was such a nice experience knowing that the stuff that you earn is valuable because someone could take it away at a moment's notice. And if you very carefully keep it safe and don't lose it, it just represents a lot of hard work and skill.
And did you kill some noobs?
I just kept to myself and tried not to get killed. I never really got high enough to kill some noobs.
So just surviving was fun enough.
I mean, it was really exhilarating just exploring because you could find bodies in the wilderness that people have lost items and no one's picked them up yet. If a guy dies from a monster, for example, you just find their stuff and then you want to get it back to town safely and people chase you and it's quite a lot of fun. So we're going to try to capture that kind of feeling in this particular game mode. But I have to stress, the main core game itself doesn't have that kind of stuff, so people shouldn't get scared off. It's pretty much just an optional gameplay mode for hyper-competitive players. You
have the freedom to offer a lot of different varieties and styles of play.
We have ideas for leagues, for example, a 6-hour league where you create a character like a little ladder reset and it's a race up the ladder, but every half an hour we eliminate the person who's at the bottom of the ladder, for example. So it's pretty much a matter of how fast can you level and can you level faster than the other players. And at the end of the 6 hours, you can give someone, a prize based on their placing, for example.
That's cool. Yeah, so it's nice kind of being a small company. You can be nimble and try a lot of different stuff out, and if it doesn't work, you just don't do it again. You don't have to roll out 5 million people at once and on something like a huge company like World of Warcraft would or something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to testing a lot of stuff like that.
One of the things I recently heard, I think it was Dave Brevik, one of the creators of the Diablo series. He was talking about designing for when he was on Diablo 1, and they wanted to put like a chest in the game. He could do that in like 2 hours. He could just code something and then have an artist put together a couple of animations, and it was done. And then, then his comparison was to when he was working on Hellgate London, or Diablo 2, I guess, would also be the same thing, where, the same thing takes 2 weeks. You need an animator, you need 3 different artists, you need a game programmer, you need a tools guy, and it's like, wow, it's just a complete pain in the ass to do the smallest features. Whereas you guys are still at that small company stage, where if you get a cool idea, you can just, you and one other guy can put it in the game in a day.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and occasionally we do run into the harder things that require the input of 7 different specialities, and those ones can take a little longer. Especially, I guess, quest stuff, for example, that requires quite a lot of environmental stuff, NPCs, monsters being made, items, game backend for the quest states. It pretty much requires the work of every single person in the company to get a quest in. So those things have to be on a longer assembly line, I guess, and take a little while more to add into the game. But on the other end of the spectrum, if we want to add a new item type, for example, a few days ago we added quivers, and they were very easy to add. There is something that you can equip alongside a bow that adds even more mods to your bow. Mm-hmm. So that was relatively easy to get in because it just took one game programmer and a small amount of art.
And then massive balancing.
Yep. Well, that's what we're in the progress of doing now with quivers. But so far people are liking them at least, so they don't seem too underpowered.
So you're pretty close. Your beta's starting in less than a week. And people who want to get into the beta should do what? Register on your forum?
That's right. If they go to pathofexile.com and sign up for an account, it'll be automatically entered into the lottery. And the intention is that once beta is started, we'll be adding people periodically. In fact, I think there will be a countdown on the site that ticks down to the next person to be added. So It'll be a little bit dramatic, but basically then they just wait and hope that they get in soon. I believe we'll also be doing beta key giveaways with various outlets, including your own site if you're interested. So
cool. And you're giving them out at PAX as well, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. If you turn up at our booth at PAX, we'll give you a beta DVD that you can use to play immediately as soon as you get home.
Or back to your hotel room if you have a laptop.
Nice, yeah. While we're at PAX and unable to fix the problems if they swarm online, yes.
Yeah, you can do it at lunch. And then come back by your booth in the afternoon and complain about something.
Well, they'll also be able to play the game at the booth. We have 6 computers set up there where they can play PvP, hopefully, and a lot of PvE content to test the game out in front of us.
Okay, well, pretty soon, and good luck with that.
Well, thank you very much.
And we'll have more news on the Diablo site and on IncGamers as well about beta stuff and hopefully some beta keys for people to get their little grubby little mitts on.
That sounds great.
All right, good talking to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, and bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.